The studio lights burned bright, reflecting off polished floors and sleek glass panels as the live broadcast counted down its final seconds before going on air. The audience buzzed with anticipation, unaware that what was about to unfold would become one of the most talked about television moments of the year. Meghan Markle sat poised in her chair, legs crossed, hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a calm smile, carefully practiced, perfectly measured. Years in the public eye had taught her how to maintain composure, even under pressure. To most viewers, she appeared confident, unshaken, and ready to control the narrative as she always did. Across from her sat Candace Owens. Unlike Meghan's polished serenity, Candace radiated sharp intensity. She leaned slightly forward, hands clasped, eyes alert and unblinking. She wasn't here to play along, and everyone in the control room knew it. Producers exchanged uneasy glances as the host adjusted his earpiece, sensing tension even before the first question was asked. 3, 2, 1, we're live. The host smiled into the camera. Tonight, we have a powerful discussion lined up. Meghan Markle joins us to talk about media, identity, and public truth. Also joining us is political commentator Candace Owens, known for her outspoken views. The audience applauded politely. At first, the conversation stayed civil. Meghan spoke eloquently about her struggles with media scrutiny, her advocacy work, and the emotional toll of public judgment. Her words flowed smoothly, as if rehearsed, measured pauses, empathetic tone, and carefully chosen phrases. Candace listened quietly, her expression unreadable. Then the host turned to her. Candace, you've been critical of Meghan's public statements. What's your response? Candace inhaled slowly. I think the issue many people have, she began calmly, isn't that Meghan tells her story, but that she tells it selectively. There's a difference between speaking your truth and rewriting reality. A ripple passed through the audience. Meghan's smile tightened, just slightly. I don't believe anyone can dictate how another person experiences pain, Meghan replied. My truth is my lived experience. Candace nodded. Of course. But when your experience involves accusations that affect institutions, families, and millions of people, then facts matter. The air in the studio thickened. The host tried to interject, but Candace continued. You've repeatedly framed yourself as silenced, yet you've had global platforms, interviews, documentaries, podcasts. At what point does being silenced stop making sense? A murmur spread across the audience. Social media monitors backstage began lighting up with reactions. Meghan shifted in her seat. Having a platform doesn't mean you're heard truthfully. Women, especially women of color, are often dismissed, no matter how loud they speak. Candace's eyes sharpened. That argument loses power when it's used as a shield against accountability. Criticism isn't oppression. Gasps echoed from the crowd. The host raised his hand nervously. Let's keep this respectful. I am being respectful, Candace said, her voice steady but firm. I'm asking direct questions that many people are afraid to ask. Meghan leaned forward now, abandoning her earlier composure. What you're doing is invalidating my pain for political theater. Candace responded instantly. And what you're doing is monetizing victimhood. The words hit like a slap. For the first time, Meghan looked genuinely shaken. The audience fell silent. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of emotion, the tightening jaw, the blink that came a second too late, the breath drawn sharply through clenched teeth. That's unfair, Meghan said quietly. Candace didn't flinch. What's unfair is accusing others without evidence, then crying cruelty when questioned. The host tried again to regain control. Candace, Meghan, let's take a breath. No, Meghan interrupted, her voice rising. I will not sit here and be attacked. Candace tilted her head. Then perhaps don't sit in interviews built on confrontation. A few audience members applauded. Others looked uncomfortable. Meghan turned toward the host. This was supposed to be a conversation, not an ambush. Candace leaned back. Strong ideas survive scrutiny. Weak narratives don't. The studio erupted, applause mixed with boos. Meghan's carefully constructed public armor was cracking. She looked around the room, realizing the energy had shifted. This wasn't a sympathetic audience anymore. This was a courtroom, and she was no longer controlling the testimony. You have no idea what I've been through, Meghan said, her voice trembling now. Candace's reply was measured, almost cold. Suffering doesn't make you right. Truth does. The control room panicked. Producers signaled the host to cut to commercial, but it was too late. The moment had escaped containment. Meghan stood abruptly. Gasps echoed again. "If this is how you treat guests," she said, "then this says more about you than me." Candace remained seated. Running from questions doesn't erase them. The host stood as well, forcing a nervous laugh. "Let's take a short break." But Meghan had already removed her microphone. Cameras caught everything. As she walked off stage, whispers exploded across the studio. Phones were out. Clips were already being uploaded. The internet was igniting in real time. Candace finally looked at the host. "This is why honesty matters." The screen faded to commercial. Backstage, Meghan's team scrambled. Advisors spoke over one another, phones buzzing nonstop. The narrative they had planned, carefully scripted and safe, had unraveled in minutes. Out on the studio floor, Candace sat alone, composed, unbothered. She knew exactly what had happened. This wasn't just an argument. It was a turning point. And the fallout was only beginning. The moment the broadcast cut to commercial, the studio exploded into chaos. Producers rushed onto the stage, voices overlapping, headsets crackling with urgent instructions. Interns darted back and forth clutching phones, while security subtly repositioned themselves near the exits. What had begun as a high-profile interview had detonated into a live television disaster, and everyone knew it. Backstage, Meghan Markle stood near her dressing room, arms crossed tightly, her face flushed with anger and disbelief. Her publicist spoke rapidly, trying to regain control of the situation. "This is bad," he said. "Clips are already trending. Hashtags are multiplying by the second." Meghan shook her head. "They set me up. That wasn't a discussion, it was an attack." One of her aides held up a phone. The screen showed a frozen frame of Candace Owens mid-sentence, subtitles blazing beneath her words. Millions of views. Thousands of comments per minute. Meanwhile, out on the studio floor, Candace remained seated, calm as ever. A makeup assistant nervously dabbed her forehead while a producer whispered urgently in her ear. "You need to soften it when we come back," he said. "This is blowing up." Candace looked up at him. "I didn't come here to soften truth." The producer swallowed and backed away. When the show returned from commercial, the host stood alone under the lights. Meghan's chair was empty. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said carefully, "we've had an unexpected development. Meghan Markle has chosen to step away from the discussion." The audience murmured. Candace was brought back on camera, her posture relaxed, her expression composed. The contrast was striking. Where Meghan had left in visible distress, Candace appeared grounded, unmoved by the storm she had helped unleash. "Candace," the host said cautiously, "this exchange has sparked strong reactions already. Do you regret how it unfolded?" Candace looked directly into the camera. "No. I regret that honest questions are now considered cruelty." The words landed with precision. Within minutes, social media platforms erupted. Some users condemned Candace, accusing her of insensitivity and aggression. Others praised her for saying what they believed no one else dared to say. The internet split cleanly down the middle, with no sign of reconciliation. News outlets jumped into action. Headlines flashed across screens. Explosive live TV clash leaves studio reeling. Unscripted moment changes the conversation forever. Audience shocked as interview spirals out of control. By morning, the incident had eclipsed every other news story. Meghan's team moved quickly. Statements were drafted, revised, rewritten. One version blamed hostile production. Another cited emotional distress. A third leaned heavily into calls for empathy and kindness. Finally, a carefully worded message was released. Meghan Markle values respectful dialogue and will not participate in environments that promote hostility over healing. It was polished, safe, familiar. But something had changed. For the first time, the response wasn't universally sympathetic. Commentators replayed the footage frame by frame. Body language experts dissected facial expressions. Former supporters questioned moments they had once accepted without hesitation. Candace, meanwhile, did nothing. She didn't post. She didn't explain. She didn't apologize. And that silence spoke loudly. 3 days later, Candace appeared on another program, this time solo. The host, visibly cautious, opened with the question everyone was asking. "Did you intend to humiliate her?" Candace shook her head. "Humiliation happens when narratives collapse under scrutiny. I didn't attack her character. I questioned her claims. The clip went viral instantly. Across the country, conversations shifted. Podcasts debated the nature of victimhood. Panel shows argued about accountability versus empathy. Even celebrities weighed in, some carefully neutral, others boldly choosing sides. Meghan retreated from the spotlight. Scheduled appearances were postponed. An upcoming speech was quietly cancelled. Insiders whispered about tension within her own circle, advisors divided over strategy. One evening, alone in her home, Meghan watched the clip again. Not the full argument, just one moment. Candace's words echoed through the room. Strong ideas survive scrutiny. Meghan turned off the screen. For years, she had mastered the art of narrative control, carefully curated interviews, sympathetic settings, friendly hosts. But this time, the script had slipped from her grasp, and the audience had noticed. Across town, Candace sat at her desk, reading notes for her next appearance. A producer had warned her to ease up, to avoid further escalation. She closed the notebook. This isn't escalation, she said quietly to herself. This is exposure. The following week, a major network announced a special panel discussion analyzing the incident and its cultural impact. Meghan was invited. She declined. Candace accepted. As the panel aired, analysts debated whether this moment marked a shift, away from unquestioned narratives and toward harder conversations. Ratings soared. Advertisers paid attention. And somewhere beneath the noise, a deeper realization settled in. Public perception was no longer controlled solely by status or sympathy. It was shaped by resilience under pressure. In stepping away, Meghan had protected herself, but she had also surrendered the moment. Candace, by staying seated, had claimed it. The cameras eventually moved on. Another story replaced this one. The news cycle always did. But reputations don't reset so easily. For Meghan Markle, the live confrontation became a fracture. Small but visible, in a once polished image. For Candace Owens, it became proof that asking uncomfortable questions still carried power. And for the audience watching from home, it was a reminder. Sometimes, the most defining moments aren't scripted. They happen when the story fights back.